Welcome back. It's a wise father that knows his own child, said England's greatest writer, and it could have been written for my next guest. I'm joined by a father and son duo who have lent their formidable and complementary skills to increasing our understanding of Shakespeare. David Crystal is an honorary professor of linguistics at Bangor University, and his son Ben, a Shakespearean actor. The pair has pioneered our understanding of the original pronunciation of Shakespeare's work, capturing the sounds of his words as they would have been spoken then. While David provides the scholarly heft to that endeavour, Ben has illustrated those studies to audiences with workshops and performances all over the world. Between them, they produce 5 books, mostly about our national bard, and the latest is Everyday Shakespeare, Lines for Life. Great pleasure to welcome you both, David and Ben.
Great to be here.
Shall we start with the book? So 365 or 6 days in the year, and we have a quote for every day. I looked up my birthday. How many goodly creatures are there here? How beauteous mankind is. That's a wonderfully positive quote.
Very appropriate.
Well,
yes.
on my birthday, I gather friends, and they tend to make an effort and, look pretty good. And I could say that on my birthday, how beauteous mankind is.
Yes, straight out of The Tempest, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
It is indeed.
And I think that's the perfect example of why we wrote it and called it Everyday Shakespeare, that these are lines that you could feel, that you could quite easily drop into a moment like that, or even, your everyday conversation.
Yeah,
but not to show off. You didn't intend this to be a show-off handbook, did you?
No, we wanted it to be a bridge, really. I think I grew up with the idea that Shakespeare is quite inaccessible and you have to have a particular background. Or
You
a particular
did?
Oh, yeah, I hated Shakespeare in school. Really couldn't stand it.
True.
And I think...
What was that, bad parenting?
No.
I blame
How
the
did
parents.
that
But we've spent our career, as our careers have overlapped with the 5 books we've written together, I suppose they've each been about building bridges towards Shakespeare and hopefully making these incredible works more accessible.
Yeah, because these are everyday quotes. You see, when people think of Shakespeare, they always think of the really famous quotes, like, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. Well, how often, Michael, have you had to say that in life? Not very often. Or, is this a dagger that I see before me? You haven't seen a dagger before you ever. And most people have.
I was in politics,
Oh, you're right. It would have been a very appropriate one.
I might have. Changing the subject a tiny bit. Well, first of all, I know you want to mention that you're going to be at the British Library on Tuesday. What is that about?
Well, this is the first, it's Litfest time of year. It's always Litfest in this country, somewhere or other. But we're doing a number of talks around literary festivals between now and Christmas. And the British Library one on Tuesday evening is the first time we're going to actually have a chance to talk about the book for 3/4 of an hour or so and illustrate what's in it. So that's the event.
We've both worked at the British Library a fair bit over the years. Dad's curated an exhibition there. I curated the Shakespeare birthday celebrations in 2016. And, of course, it's the 50th anniversary of the British Library this year. And this talk's part of that, 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening.
Ben, you have the most lovely actor's voice.
And
so I'm going to just set you up. Would you prepare some lines that you could read to us
yes,
at the end of all this? But let's just cover first also this... original pronunciation. Now, is this particularly your baby?
Well, yes, in a way, but it's prompted by Shakespeare's Globe. You see, when Shakespeare's Globe started in the south there, they wanted original theatre as best they could, original costumes, original music, original movement around the stage and everything. But for many years, they didn't do original pronunciation. That was because they thought that people wouldn't understand it. 400 years ago, pronunciation has changed a lot, they thought. So it was really a bit of a brave action by Tim Carroll, the director there, in 2004, doing a production of Romeo and Juliet. And he rang me up and said, David, you know about the history of English pronunciation. Do you think we could do Romeo in OP, as they call it, original pronunciation?
Do you want to try me on it? Do you want to see whether I would understand original pronunciation?
Well, yeah, the best way to do it, I think, is to get the contrast. If Ben does a short bit, and to hear it in modern English, and then I'll do it in OP, and you'll hear the contrast. So
a short bit, so just the entirety of To Be or Not to Be, then? Or...
later.
Okay. All right. So how about this from one of the sonnets? When to the sessions of sweet, silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste.
Now, this is a sonnet, Michael, so every couplet has got to rhyme exactly, because that's the way sonnets were. So did you notice? Things past, my dear time's waste. Come on, Shakespeare, what's going on? I mean, are you really a bad poet? No, of course you're not. What's happened is that the pronunciation has shifted. So this is
Are you sure about that?
I can tell you why in just a sec,
Okay,
but
fine.
let's hear it first of all in OP, and then you'll get the sense of it. When to the sessions of sweet, silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. So past and wast then rhyme perfectly. Now, everybody says, how do you know? How do you know? And there are three ways in which you know. First of all, you look at all those rhymes in Shakespeare that don't work in modern English, and you think...
But they work on the page. You can see the relation between the words on the page.
Some do, some don't. But you know, that's the first piece of evidence.
And you're talking about a time when 80% of people were illiterate as well, so there's eye
They weren't
rhymes.
seeing it on the page.
Yeah, they wouldn't have seen it anyway. And then the second kind of evidence is the spellings. You know, spelling wasn't standard like it is today, and often the spellings represent the pronunciation. So that's another kind of evidence. And then the third and the most important kind of evidence is the fact that people wrote books at the end of the 16th and early 17th century saying how words were to be pronounced. So you put all of that together and you get that kind of very interesting accent. I mean, you'll notice some of the features of it. The R is pronounced after a vowel, for instance. You know, it's heart, not heart. Words like old woes, not old woes. You know, it's old woes. And then dear, for example, and times, that I sound that's in there. And these are the features that, not just me, I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of people who have been studying this kind of thing for over 100 years. Yeah. But I was the first to try and actually put it into practice in a theatrical context.
Are some audiences delighted with this because it is closer to the way they're speaking than, say, the way I speak?
Yeah. Well, you speak very nicely.
Well, but I speak, I think, in a very modern way. That's what you're telling me.
I think that's the thing that caught my interest in original pronunciation. I grew up with the idea that Shakespeare should sound in a particular accent. Indeed, actors are still going to drama school and being told they don't have the right accent for Shakespeare. And this exploration was a real game changer and field leveler, I think, because everyone that comes to hear Shakespeare in original pronunciation come away from the sound saying, oh, that sounds like me. I recognise my own accent in it.
You speak like that where I come from. That was the standard reaction. You know, people hear words like old and they think, oh, that's Welsh, you see. Or they hear like day for day, and that's Yorkshire, you know. And there's a bit of that all over the place in here. And the Americans, of course, love it because the R after the vowel.
Yes, so to come away from Shakespeare with familiarity, I think, is a real important thing.
I want to cover one more topic, because another thing that you are doing is you're doing quick productions. You'll need to explain what those are, but again, it's in the name of authenticity, or certainly getting back to old practice.
I think authenticity is a really dangerous term. I think that's something that the Shakespeare's Globe has people have tried to saddle that institution with. When you look at how Shakespeare would have been done 400 years ago, whether it's architecturally or in terms of some sort of rehearsal or production practice, there's certainly things to be learned. Now, we know that they would have had, instead of the 6 to 10 weeks of rehearsal that Shakespeare has nowadays, they would have had about 3 days or 6 mornings. 18 hours, basically. And so I've been exploring for the last 10 years, raising Shakespeare we started with 2 weeks, then we gave ourselves 5 days. We average about 3 days, and I've raised a Shakespeare production in a day as well. And the thing is that this rehearsal process is written into the fabric, into the DNA of the writing, because, of course, Shakespeare was writing these plays knowing his actors were limited on time. So there is a way to do it, and not just do it, but do it incredibly well. And it's been a fascinating exploration.
It's electrifying. I mean,
every performance is different.
Yeah, but the biggest
different
problem
every night.
The biggest problem you keep telling me about acting is how to make the lines sound fresh after 6 weeks of rehearsal. You know.
Yeah.
Well, with just 3 days, those lines sound fresh.
Talking of fresh lines, have you got a little piece?
Sure.
20 to 30 seconds worth, perhaps?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's one...
best actorly voice.
In my best actorly voice, my goodness. Well, here's one at the beginning of October. Here, being thus together, we are an endless mind to one another. We are one another's wife, ever begetting new births of love. We are father, friends, acquaintance. We are in one another families. I am your heir and you are mine. This place is our inheritance. No hard oppressor dare take this from us. Here, with a little patience, we shall live long and loving.
That was absolutely magnificent. So if you want to find lines like that every day of the year, maybe for your birthday or whatever, Everyday Shakespeare, Lines for Life. Thank you very much to David and Ben Crystal. I turn now to a wordsmith of more recent vintage.